This photo of a young boy hugging a police officer became one of the most viral images shared around the world during the Black Lives Matter protests. And if you live anywhere near Washington State, chances are you've heard of that same boy, a member of the so-called Heart Tribe. This family made waves on Facebook, constantly posting photos of what looked like a happy, blended home. 2 smiling moms and 6 adopted Black children. People praised them for their activism, their unity, and their picture-perfect moments that seemed too good to be true. But nothing, and I mean nothing, could have prepared the world for what came next. What looked beautiful on the surface would soon reveal something far darker underneath. It's one of those stories that reminds us just how deceiving appearances can be, and how even the most heartwarming images can hide a heartbreaking truth.
They portray this happy little family, and yet, the night before, their daughter's telling us, please, 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 begging us not to make her go back and that they're abusing her. And then Devontae coming over here and telling us that, he's being starved to death.
The family they were talking about was the Hart family, the same ones we mentioned earlier as the Hart Tribe. To understand how their story began, we head up north to the quiet, rarely spotlighted state of South Dakota. Tucked in the heart of mainland America, South Dakota is known for its wide-open spaces, breathtaking prairies, and landmarks like Badlands National Park. It's the kind of place where people fish, hunt, and hike for fun, a peaceful contrast to the noise of city life. And in this calm and rural backdrop is where Jennifer Hart and Sarah Gengler first crossed paths. Jennifer was from Huron, and Sarah grew up near a tiny place called Big Stone City. And when we say tiny, we mean it. With a population of just about 500 people, it could barely fill a single passenger jet. Both Jennifer and Sarah had surprisingly similar upbringings. The oldest siblings in their families raised in rural towns, and both did well enough in high school to go on to college. They each dreamed of becoming school teachers, with Sarah focusing specifically on special education. By what seemed like coincidence, or maybe fate, both women ended up transferring to Northern State University in Aberdeen, South Dakota. That was back in 1999, and neither of them could have guessed that what started as classmates would quickly grow into friendship, and eventually a romantic relationship. But let's not forget, this was rural South Dakota in the late 90s, and being openly gay wasn't exactly easy, especially not when you've grown up in tight-knit traditional communities. So, Jennifer and Sarah kept their relationship a secret, telling friends and family they were just close pals. Eventually, Jennifer dropped out of college before finishing her course, but Sarah stuck it out and earned her degree in special education. After graduation, they both decided it was time to stop hiding. They came out publicly, and while they knew not everyone would accept them, they were ready, and sure enough, some friends walked away. But they stood by each other and decided to start fresh, moving to Alexandria, Minnesota, a charming city known for its lakes and calm lifestyle. Once settled in Alexandria, they both found work at the biggest department store in town. Sarah climbed the ranks to management, while Jennifer remained in the juniors section. Co-workers described Sarah as calm and reserved, while Jennifer was bold, brash, and sometimes hard to get along with. But together they somehow balanced each other out, like yin and yang, each one filling in the other's gaps. By their mid-20s, though, they both felt something was missing. Their routine had become too quiet, too predictable. That's when they decided to become foster parents, something that many see as a beautiful and meaningful way to grow a family and make a difference. They were young, educated, and employed, so they qualified. In 2014, they took in their first foster child, a 15-year-old girl named Lee. At first, it all seemed great. Jennifer and Sarah took Lee on trips, brought her to events, and tried to create lasting memories. They went camping, visited amusement parks. On the surface, it looked like a picture-perfect start. But only a few months later, cracks began to show. People around them started noticing that Jennifer and Sarah often complained about Lee, mocking her habits, attitude, and interests. They even told others that Lee had a habit of picking food from the trash, which said more about their judgment than about the child herself. The foster experience that started with such excitement quickly soured. Still, the couple pressed on, bringing in more children. Eventually, Lee found herself watching Jennifer and Sarah gush over photos of 2 new kids they planned to adopt, a younger brother and sister, and even talking about adopting a 4th child from a pregnant woman once the baby was born. But that excitement didn't include Lee. Just a week later, she was dropped off at what she thought was a normal therapist appointment, only to be told that Jennifer and Sarah weren't coming back. No goodbye, no explanation. They'd completely abandoned her. Just like that, she was out of their lives. By 2006, 2 years after sending Lee back into the foster care system, Jennifer and Sarah officially adopted 3 children: 2-year-old Abigail, 4-year-old Hannah, and 7-year-old Marcus. Statistically, these children were considered hard to place. Sadly, race still plays a big role in adoption rates, and all 3 were black siblings, which meant they had to be adopted together, something many families were unwilling or unable to do. But Jennifer and Sarah took them in, and on the outside, it looked like a beautiful act of compassion. Now, this is where Jennifer Hart really began curating the image of her so-called perfect family online. She started regularly posting on Facebook, documenting what she called their first night as a family of 5. But instead of warmth and sweetness, the night sounded chaotic, even alarming. She described incidents of urination, someone pooping on the walls, a child taking a tumble, and one even needing the Heimlich maneuver. It was wild, and while most parents would probably panic or keep something like that private, Jen shared it openly, almost like it was some quirky adventure. She wrote that the kids were difficult, misbehaved, and deeply troubled, but insisted that she and Sarah were in it for the long haul. "If not us, who will?" she said, as if they were the last hope for these children. And while raising 3 traumatized children is undeniably tough, it didn't stop Jen and Sarah from applying to adopt even more. Just 2 years later, in the spring of 2008, their application was approved once again. This time, they were given 3 more children: 5-year-old Devante, 4-year-old Jeremiah, and 3-year-old Sierra. With 6 adopted kids now in their care, all black children and all from troubled backgrounds, the cracks in the family dynamic started to show. Not long after the new additions arrived, things took a troubling turn. That same year, Hannah showed up to school with visible bruises on her legs. When her teacher asked what happened, Hannah said one of her mothers had hit her with a belt. But when Jen and Sarah were questioned, they brushed it off. They claimed ignorance and said maybe Hannah got the bruises while playing. Shockingly, no charges were filed. But what happened next was even more suspicious. All 3 kids were pulled out of school, just like that. It wasn't until social services were notified that the children were eventually re-enrolled. Still, the warning signs were growing louder. Despite all of this, Jen kept her social media active, carefully painting a rosy picture of their unconventional family. 2 white lesbian moms raising 6 beautiful black children. Sarah stayed working in retail, supporting them financially, while Jen became a full-time stay-at-home mom. But she wasn't just staying home. She took the kids on trips to what she called transformation festivals. These were multi-day events, filled with music, dancing, yoga, and a kind of bohemian spiritual atmosphere. That lifestyle shift eventually led the family to leave Minnesota and move to Oregon in 2013. drawn to a more accepting community and closer proximity to their favorite musicians and events. Not long after the move, Jen and Sarah officially tied the knot, with Sarah taking Jennifer's last name, Hart, along with the children. From that point forward, Jen's Facebook became a full-blown highlight reel. Post after post showed smiling kids in flower crowns, group hugs at festivals, gardening sessions, or artsy candid shots around the house. Her captions were filled with talk of love, healing, community, and acceptance. The kind of content that raked in likes and shares. The public was enamored. People saw them as selfless heroes. Two moms who had stepped up to save 6 children and were raising them in a peaceful, progressive bubble. It was a perfectly curated story, and it worked. The world applauded. But behind those filtered moments and carefully chosen words was a reality that was anything but loving. Government reports and school records started telling a different story. Teachers had noticed bruises on the children. Some of them had even confided that they were locked in rooms or denied food at home. In fact, some of the kids resorted to stealing food from classmates just to get by. Abigail told one teacher that Jennifer had punished her by dunking her head in cold water, then slapping her across the face. Yet every time something serious was reported, the Hart family seemed to slip through the cracks. And then, just like before, they removed the children from school entirely. This time, permanently. They claimed they were switching to homeschooling. It didn't stop there. Whistleblowers, neighbors, friends, even acquaintances started contacting Child Protective Services. Their reports were deeply disturbing. They said Jen ran the house like a strict boot camp. The children were terrified of her. One particularly dark claim was that Jen controlled food access, not just as punishment, but as leverage. She reportedly withheld meals unless the kids posed for happy, affectionate photos that she could post online. Photographers who worked with the family said the same thing. The kids would beam for the camera on cue, obedient and cheerful. But as soon as the camera was gone, the smiles vanished. The light in their eyes disappeared. The transformation was eerie, like someone flipping a switch. Now the CPS eventually got involved again and began interviewing the Hart children about their home life. You'd think this would be the turning point, right? But strangely, during these interviews, each child gave eerily similar answers, almost like they had been rehearsed. One by one, they all denied any abuse happening at home. No red flags, no cries for help, just calm, uniform responses that made it seem like everything was perfectly fine. But that's exactly what made it so unsettling. Then, in the year 2014, Devontae Hart, one of Jen and Sarah's youngest adopted sons, became a viral sensation. His photo, taken during a Black Lives Matter protest, showed him tearfully hugging a white police officer while holding a "Free Hugs" sign. The image tugged at people's hearts, became a symbol of hope, and quickly spread across the internet. Devontae was dubbed the boy who hugged a cop. And the story got so big that it was featured on national news outlets and even made its way to Saturday Night Live. Jen, who had always craved attention, basked in the public love. Her social media was filled with emotional captions and curated images of her family doing crafts, gardening, or attending rallies. The message was always the same: love, peace, healing, unity. It looked like the dream family, but by the time 2016 rolled around, Jen's Facebook suddenly went silent. No more posts, no more updates, just nothing. It wasn't until the following year, 2017, that Jen resurfaced online. But this time, her tone was different, defensive. She posted that people around them didn't understand their progressive alternative lifestyle. Behind those vague words, though, something more strategic was happening. CPS was circling again, investigations were heating up, and instead of facing it, Jen and Sarah packed up and moved quietly. No fanfare, no goodbye posts, just a silent escape to Woodland, Washington. There, they found a large 2-story farmhouse out in the countryside. It was remote, peaceful, and most importantly, out of the spotlight. Jen restarted her Facebook again, trying to pick up where she left off. New posts, new family photos, the same old "we're living in love" narrative. But behind the filtered photos, the truth was unraveling fast. One night, in the middle of a warm July evening, something terrifying happened. 15-year-old Hannah Hart jumped out of her second-story bedroom window and ran barefoot to a neighbor's house, the home of Donna and Bruce DeKalb. It was past 2 in the morning and the couple was woken by frantic knocking. There was Hannah, scared, hungry, and begging not to be taken back home. The DeKalbs were shocked. And before long, the rest of the Hart family was outside, calling for Hannah. When Jen finally got to their door, she coolly brushed it all off, saying Hannah was lying for attention. But Donna and Bruce didn't feel right about it. Something about Hannah's panic, her fear, just didn't sit well. The next day, Donna's daughter called the police. She told them, "There's some kids I feel are being highly abused." She described how Hannah jumped out of the window and begged to stay hidden, and how later the kids came back, all lined up stiffly and repeating the same thing, that everything was fine. It was clear something wasn't.
Yeah, there's some kids that I feel is being highly abused. Okay, I'm going to give you the address of my daughter's house because it's right next door.
Okay, what's going on there?
The other night, a little girl jumped out of the second-story window on the roof and then down onto the ground and ran to my daughter, and this is like 2 in the morning, begging them to help her. And when they came looking for her, she was begging my daughter not to let them know she was there. And then eventually my son-in-law let him know. And then she had all 4 of the kids come back later and to say everything was okay, and they were all standing at attention like they were just scared to death. And I think there's something very serious going on there. I'm very concerned for these kids.
The very next day, the DeKalbs received a letter that was supposedly written by Hannah, apologizing for her behavior, but the wording, it didn't sound like a 15-year-old. It was overly formal, rehearsed, almost like someone else had written it. Donna and Bruce didn't want drama with the neighbors, but now they were on alert. Donna started keeping a diary, noting everything she observed. The blinds in the Hart home were always closed. The kids looked thinner every time she saw them. They were never seen outside playing. It was like they were being hidden. And then came Devante. This time, the approach was quieter. He knocked on their door and calmly asked for food. He told them he was always hungry and asked if they could leave some snacks at the edge of the property somewhere his parents wouldn't see. And in a heartbreaking moment, he quietly admitted that everything Hannah had said was true. He even asked them to contact social services. That was it. The DeKalbs called child services. And on March 23, 2018, CPS showed up at the Hart home to check in. But when they arrived, there was no answer, no movement. No one came to the door. They left a note and returned a few days later. But when they came back, things had taken a chilling turn. The driveway was completely empty. The family's SUV was gone. Debris and concrete blocks were scattered in front of the house. The Hart family had vanished without a trace, and for the first time, there were no poetic posts from Jen, no smiling photos, no hashtags about love. Just silence. What investigators would find next was the horrifying result of the Hart family's SUV crashing through a small retaining wall and plummeting down a 100-foot cliff. It was clear from the scene that the family had left their home in a panic. Donna DeKalb, the concerned neighbor who had already witnessed signs of abuse, couldn't shake the feeling that something was very, very wrong. She had known in her gut that the Harts were running. That much had been obvious, but no amount of suspicion could have prepared her for the grim truth that was about to unfold. Just 2 days before the crash, on the 24th of March, 2018, Jennifer and Sarah Hart loaded all 6 of their adopted children into their SUV. They told the kids they were going on a road trip. It wasn't unusual for the family to take unannounced trips, but this time felt different, rushed, urgent, almost desperate. Jennifer got behind the wheel and drove off in a hurry, even smashing through a small wall in the process, which would later become a disturbing piece of the puzzle. Unlike her usual social media fanfare, there were no cheerful posts or photo updates about this so-called road trip. But what there was, however, was a digital breadcrumb trail. Cell phone data pinged off several towers along the coastal highways as the family traveled south, leaving Washington, moving through Oregon, and eventually making their way into Northern California. Along the way, they made a brief stop at a service station to buy food, but the children never got out of the car. They remained hidden, quiet, invisible. On March 25th, the day before CPS returned to find the Hart house eerily empty, a security camera caught footage of Jennifer at a Safeway grocery store. The next known stop was at a Walmart in California. There, Sarah bought a large bottle of Benadryl, a common allergy medication known for causing extreme drowsiness in high doses. After the purchase, Sarah returned to the SUV and prepared sandwiches for the children, carefully slipping doses of Benadryl into their food. 19-year-old Marcus was given the largest dose, around 20 pills. At the same time, Jennifer, who was not a regular drinker, began consuming several beers. It was deeply uncharacteristic behavior for her. But that day was clearly different. Once the kids had eaten, unknowingly drugged, Sarah and Jennifer got back into their seats. Jennifer was still behind the wheel, even after drinking, and Sarah, phone in hand, began searching for disturbing things like, how much Benadryl would it take to kill a 130-pound woman? And how long does it take to die from drowning in hypothermia? She even searched, does it hurt to die? After those searches, Sarah swallowed 42 pills of Benadryl herself. It's chilling to imagine what was going through her mind, whether she was terrified, numb, or just resigned to what was coming. In the early morning hours of March 26th, the family left Walmart and continued their drive along the rugged coastline. Sometime after, they arrived at a cliff near Westport, California. The children were still in the back seat, unbuckled, sedated, and barely conscious. The SUV stopped briefly near the edge of the cliff, just long enough for the final decision to be made. Then, without hesitation, Jennifer pressed her foot down on the gas pedal. The car shot forward, accelerated toward the edge, and flew off the 100-foot cliff, plunging toward the rocky ocean below at an estimated 90 miles per hour. At around 4:15 in the afternoon on that same day, officers were alerted to a vehicle wreckage spotted at the base of the cliff near Westport. When emergency crews arrived, they found the SUV upside down and partially submerged in seawater. Floating nearby were the lifeless bodies of Abigail Jeremiah and Marcus Hart. Once the vehicle was raised from the water, the remains of Jennifer and Sarah were also found. 5 members of the family were now confirmed dead. All of them had died from blunt force trauma caused by the impact. There was no mystery, no technical malfunction, no chance of it being a freak accident. The crash was deliberate, it was calculated, it was murder.
And the Hart SUV went from standing still to gas pedal floored as Jennifer Hart sat behind the wheel, legally drunk.
We have the vehicle going from 34% throttle to 100% throttle, and there's no subsequent application of the brake.
As the investigation deepened, the missing children, Hannah, Sierra, and Devontae, became the center of desperate hope. Maybe they hadn't been in the car, maybe they'd escaped. Maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance. Their faces were plastered on missing persons bulletins, news reports, and community boards. But hope quickly dwindled. Just 2 weeks after the crash, Sierra's body was discovered floating in the water near the crash site. And 2 months later, a small human foot washed ashore and was confirmed through DNA testing to belong to Hannah Hart. To this day, Davante's body has never been recovered. Authorities believe the ocean likely claimed him, pulling him out to sea forever. In the early hours after the crash, some investigators still held on to the theory that maybe this was some tragic accident, that perhaps Jennifer fell asleep at the wheel or the brakes gave out. But all evidence told a different story. There were no skid marks near the edge of the cliff, no signs that anyone attempted to brake or swerve. The vehicle's black box, its onboard computer, confirmed this. It showed the SUV coming to a brief stop, then accelerating rapidly off the cliff's edge. It was not an accident. It was intentional. It was final. When authorities searched the Hart home, what they found was haunting. There were no signs that children had lived there. No toys, no books, no signs of laughter or life. The picture frames on the wall were all empty. Inside, it was cold, sterile, and devoid of joy. Autopsies revealed that nearly all the children were severely underweight. Despite being teenagers, their bodies were the size of much younger kids, some equivalent to a toddler's weight. They had been starved, both physically and emotionally. The smiling photos Jennifer had shared online were staged. The happy captions were lies. And the story of a loving alternative family was nothing more than a polished social media-ready fantasy. In the end, Jennifer and Sarah Hart weren't the selfless heroes they wanted the world to see. They weren't brave mothers or progressive role models. They were manipulative, controlling, and terrified of being exposed. Rather than face the consequences of their actions, rather than risk losing control over the children they so desperately wanted to display like trophies, they chose the unthinkable. They murdered 6 innocent children to protect their own fragile egos and twisted reputations. It's sickening. It's heartbreaking. And worst of all, it was entirely preventable. We'll never truly know why Jennifer and Sarah did what they did. Maybe they were overwhelmed, drowning in debt, exhausted by the responsibilities of raising 6 adopted children. But even if that were true, it doesn't justify this. They had options, they had time, they had a choice. And they chose a death, not just for themselves, but for the very children they were supposed to protect. The system failed them, the state failed them. CPS didn't act fast enough despite repeated warnings. And ultimately, 6 young lives were stolen in one of the most senseless and chilling crimes in modern American history. These children, Abigail, Hannah, Marcus, Sierra, Jeremiah, and Davante, deserved better. They were already dealt a hard hand in life, born into circumstances that required intervention. And instead of finding the healing and safety they needed, they ended up in the hands of 2 women who saw them as props for internet fame. They were neglected, abused, isolated, and ultimately discarded in the most violent way imaginable. This wasn't just a failure of parenting. It was a failure of humanity, of oversight, of compassion. It's impossible to find a silver lining in this story. There is no twist ending or lesson that makes it okay. The only thing we can do is remember these children, speak their names, and keep telling their story so that something like this never happens again. Let their lives remind us that we need to do better, as neighbors, as communities, as a system. And let us never forget that beneath the smiles and hashtags were real kids, with real dreams, silenced forever. Now, I really want to hear your thoughts. Do you think this heartbreaking tragedy could have been prevented? Or do you believe Jennifer and Sarah adopted these children with the sole intention of using and abusing them from the very start? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you've made it this far, be sure to check out this next video. I think you'll enjoy it. Thank you once again for watching.